RevOpsAF, the only podcast for people who are RevOpsAF and want to learn all about things that are RevOps AF.
Our goal is to give the revenue operations community, that includes marketing, sales, and CS, for any of you not paying attention, the skills needed to accelerate their careers.
Welcome to RevOps AF, the podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, Camela Thompson, and today I am joined by Lauren Knight. Lauren, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm Lauren. I've spent kind of the last decade building go-to-market and RevOps foundations for early-stage startups and teams. Most of my work really lies kind of between product, data, and revenue. So yeah, really excited for today's discussion.
I am too, because I run into this many times, maybe not always this flavor, but it seems like as a company grows, the CEO has this epiphany or the board pushes them one day and suddenly they want to change how everything is priced, sold, processed. So we're going to talk about product-led growth. And I can just feel the cringes happening as that word reverberates out. So before we really get into it, let's talk about what actually is product-led growth, because when I hear executives talk about it, it's not always what I picture as product-led growth.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's something, honestly, it's one of my favorite go-to-market motions, but I think it's something a lot of companies truly get wrong. So product-led growth, at least in my mind, is really where the product sells itself. Right? So the product is driving both acquisition, it's driving activation, conversion, retention, expansion. It's all truly product-led. It's not just having kind of a free trial or a freemium model. It's not kind of just like building a sign-up flow. It's not just building onboarding. Like, those are great tactics, but I think it's really, product-led growth is really where the product is doing the selling in place of a sales team, right? And we see a lot of kind of like hybrid approaches as well, right? Where you have both sales-led and product-led motions at specific companies. But yeah, I think that's kind of how I think about it. I'm curious kind of how you've seen folks define it.
Oh, I agree with your definition. Let's start there. So great examples of product-led growth. I see a ton on the marketing side, especially around content creation, like Riverside, a platform we're using for podcasting, Canva. But a good one that pops up a lot of the time would be something like Zoom, where, one or two people probably start with it, and then the rest of the company, they have to get a solution, and it goes from there, and you rarely talk to support or sales. How I see executives try to shoehorn their product into it before it's ready, I think that's where we get mixed up, is we want to be product-led growth, but maybe we're not ready for that yet. So we think we're doing it by offering a free trial. And if the free trial moves to a salesperson and has a complex implementation, or you need a support staff in order to support that product, to me, that's not product-led growth yet. So maybe... Okay, cool. So maybe we can talk through signs your product isn't ready for product-led growth yet.
Yeah, I think you really kind of hit the nail on the head with some of the commentary that you've already made, which is if your product is highly complex, if the onboarding is somewhat complicated, if the time to value is not almost immediate, like you want to think almost instant gratification. Time to value is really kind of the big thing in a product-led growth motion. So if the onboarding cannot be kind of self-serviced, if you have a really kind of like complex, or you're in a highly regulated space, probably not going to be the fit. If you need to give demos of your product for folks to really understand all the features and functionality, probably not a great fit for the product-led motion, right? It's really about companies where you get that quick speed to value. Users can really kind of be in your platform and learn more and understand kind of what your platform does and expand from there. And then I think also there's a certain like virality aspect as well, right? Which is like through collaboration and sharing, that is typically how these companies do really well and expand.
Yeah, and good examples of that might be Figma or Miro, where somebody creates a project and other people need to jump on board to see it, and suddenly you have a bunch of users.
Or even just like Calendly, right? Or Zoom.
Yeah.
Like you said, right? You send out an invite, people use your calendar. Oh, that's actually really convenient. We don't have to do this back and forth anymore of when are you available and can we find time to coordinate? And so they sign up for a Calendly, and it gets the flywheel in motion.
I think where I see a lot of people trying to be PLG but underestimating how much help their customers need AI and AI analytics in particular. There's a lot of companies breaking into that space and selling their tool as a replacement for a revenue operations or an analyst without taking into account the amount of business context and interpretation that still needs to go in to a tool like that to make it useful.
Yeah.
So even if your product, like technically people can sign up for it and run with it, if you start seeing retention issues, it's time to rethink it, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's another kind of like key element, right? Is it's not just this like 14-day free trial, or like it's not the tool that's really cool. You go, you try out, you use it once, and you're like, okay, that accomplished its purpose, and now I'm never going to use it again. It has to have kind of that stickiness factor where people find it useful almost immediately, and it's like, oh, I can also use it for this, and I can use it for this, and I can use it for this, and then I am also sharing it, and again bringing others into that collaboration. Like I think Notion is another like really great example of like, you use that tool, it's very quick to get some like easy wins, you start sharing, you start collaborating, now your whole team's on there. You are never getting out of Notion.
Oh yeah, project management tools are notorious for that.
Yeah.
So let's talk about some of the things you need to think through before you say you're ready. So on the infrastructure side and what all's talking to which system, let's talk through that a little bit.
Yeah, so I think there's kind of a lot from a systems perspective that you have to kind of consider, and you really have to have the infrastructure. So I'll say a couple things. I think first and foremost, your product has to stand on its own two legs. So again, it has to be in a place where it really is self-serve, and you don't need sales or marketing to really drive home the values of the functionality. But beyond that, from an infrastructure standpoint, you also need to make sure you're capturing data all across that customer journey. Everything from folks visiting your website via like Segment or like a CDP for event tracking and identity resolution. You need to actually have your product analytics in something like a Mixpanel, an Amplitude. You need your CRM. You still need a CRM, even in a PLG motion. It's still important to track your deals. Yeah, we're now talking PQLs instead of MQLs, but it's setting that up. Setting up your billing, your Stripe billing, that piece, any kind of user interaction tools that you might be using, whether that's on the onboarding side. A lot of companies have these really nice onboarding flows, which kind of guide you through how to use their platform or use their tool. And then same with the like customer support or service side of things. So you're seeing a lot of like intercom, and a lot of that is AI at this point, but that's
for better or worse at times,
Yeah, exactly. It can be really frustrating from a user experience, but it also can be amazing when it's referencing a really well thought out guide, or the actual product itself is so intuitive that you don't even need it, right?
Yeah, I see a lot of companies where their product's been around for the last 5 to 10 years going through some really painful self-discovery moments because engineering either wasn't anticipating product-led, or they're now realizing how difficult it is to build those things on later. And what I'm referencing specifically, product analytics you mentioned, but also integrations or integration capability to different systems to track usage, users, signups, all the things. So what are some things you run into as a revenue operator that you wish you could have gotten in front of the engineering team at the beginning and said, hey, you need to keep this in mind?
Yeah, so I think for me, it's figuring out where your source of truth is going to be for everything. For me, I personally love using a CRM for that. I think it's a great place to keep, again, all of your company and deal data, and then to actually like pipe in all of that additional information from like segment, from Mixpanel. So you've got all of your product usage data. And then from there, you can actually kind of like build like lifecycle messaging around that. So I think it's really just, obviously, you know, in a perfect world, you're getting that set up from the get-go, right? So, I mean, for me, fortunately, I work with a lot of like earlier stage startups, so it really is kind of more that 0 to 1 phase where we do really talk about kind of the infrastructure and the data architecture that needs to happen. What are those key elements that we need to map over that's going to drive different activities, right? Like, what do we want to know that they've done within our app, and how is that going to prompt different communications to this user to get them to re-engage, to remind them to share, to reactivate them if they haven't been in the platform for a while, right? So making sure that you're really pulling all of those data points in so you have a really like cohesive view of your customers, and then you can put together really nice reports and dashboards on that data as well. And again, it lives in one place. So you know who your champions are, you know who your evangelists are, and you also know where you're struggling. Maybe it's a specific industry or specific customer type, but that really kind of helps you parse out, well, okay, maybe we're not finding product market fit with this particular audience and we are with another.
I like how you went beyond like the activation and sign up, because I feel like that's where people fall down a lot, is how do I, like, we need to think through, how do we identify where people are getting stuck consistently? Yeah. And then how do we resolve that gracefully? And sometimes that's a chat prompt to a resource, or maybe it's an embedded video. I don't know. Get creative. It's fun.
Totally. And it's also like heat mapping, right, within your own product to figure out, hey, you know, I was working with one company whose experience is probably like 20 to 30 steps before you actually get your final end product, which is maybe fine, but it's a lot of steps for the user. So you have a lot of folks who start because they're excited by the product, they think that it's gonna suit their needs, and they get halfway through and it's just too much, right? So being able to see that heat map and see exactly kind of where they are in the customer journey and say, hey, we have a ton of drop off here. Is there any way we can consolidate this down? Like, it's great that we have all these extra features, but can we unlock those after we're already providing them some value? So again, getting that real like time to value, speed to value, that's what you really got to keep the end users in mind for kind of the entire customer journey here.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about what you would guide people to test out or think about. Like, what kind of roadmap would you think through for people who are thinking about moving in this direction?
Yeah, so I think in the PLG motion, your roadmap is always your usage data, right? Like, that kind of guides everything that you do. And I think there's a really big culture shift from true like PLG companies from sales-led companies. And I mean that in the sense of it operates much more like an earlier stage startup. You're doing things in more bite-sized chunks. You're doing really fast iterations. There's a lot of experimentation within the team. There also needs to be a lot of kind of like psychological safety around just like being able to ship features that you might pull a couple weeks later. But I think your usage data really guides that product roadmap in terms of like where you're seeing people fall off, where you're having a lot of success, where are we converting really well, what expansion opportunities are really taking off, what's not landing, and potentially removing those. Is pricing a particular issue that we're seeing, particularly as we're asking folks to upgrade or pay for additional features or move from a trial to a paid conversion?
Yeah, and I'm flashing back to, I'm going to age myself, but really early in my career when software was really localized and dependent on each person's machine's capability. It wasn't cloud-based like it was today, we did a ton of user testing because the capability, like the memory pull, like all of that just wasn't where it needed to be to make things move quickly and intuitively. So we did a ton of usability testing. Do you see, I'm just curious, customers or a place for more customer interviews and interactions as a result of PLG than you normally would in, say, like a normal B2B SaaS motion?
Yeah, I think you almost have to have that, right? Because it's like you have to really understand what your target audience is looking for and what features they like and what they don't like. And even simple little like UX tweaks can be really like frustrating to the user. And I think we've seen that even within some of the more simple platforms, right? They make really tiny tweaks and people lose their minds over it, absolutely hate it. So I think there's a lot more testing involved in kind of just, and again, I think that's why it's helpful to really understand your evangelists. I think it's important to kind of have your friendlies at these companies that you can kind of share early features, share with them sandbox views so they can kind of preview it and give you feedback before you're kind of like rolling out more broadly.
It's so funny because Zoom was an example of product led, and they did a bit of a tweak recently where they made it easier to sign up for new stuff, but if you're an existing client, they made it harder to get to your account, and it just drove me crazy. So the littlest things can really make an impact.
Totally. Or even like the little like reactions, right? That like I think everybody was immediately opted into. And if you're somebody like me who talks a lot with your hands, you've got balloons coming up in the background and you're like, this is not the time, not the place. And like you eventually figure out how to opt out of that. But yeah, like very small adjustments can be really painful for your end users. So it's just, testing those out, doing a lot of like A/B tests on that and figuring out what works and what doesn't, and then letting that usage data guide what you continue to kind of build.
So UX UI is so important, being able to read heat maps and make changes accordingly, being in touch with your customers. What would you recommend to revenue operators who are hearing this pitch to them for the first time by their CEO? What are the kind of landmines they should be looking out for and communicating early on?
Yeah, so I think you highlighted one of them earlier, which is first and foremost like making sure that data is all integrated, because if it's not, you can get very different stories if you're pulling from different systems. So I think like that integration piece is really kind of fundamental and foundational. I think the other piece, I think a lot of companies, I don't think it's this like shift from sales-led to product-led growth. I think a lot of companies benefit from more of this like hybrid approach, which is using the PLG motion as an experiment, right? So it's like finding out if that actually does work within their kind of industry, with their vertical, with the product market fit that they do have, testing that out and making sure it really kind of like lands before building out like a full cohesive strategy around it. So I believe a lot in kind of like a lot of iterations, a lot of like testing, and then letting the data inform the strategy. Because I think in some industries this works really well, and in some it doesn't at all.
Yeah, for sure. So what else would you like to add, either to revenue operators or to executives who are considering this? This is your platform. Let them know what they're getting into.
I think it's an awesome motion. I think there's a lot of benefits to it, right? You can scale really, really quickly with a really lean team. What I will say is it takes a lot of time to get it set up right from the get-go to do this well, right? So spend the time up front building out the infrastructure, doing the testing, getting all your systems set up and aligned, having reports and dashboards so you can very quickly spot any kind of like problem areas or hot spots, and then just start testing and iterating on it. I think it's a great motion if it works for your particular product.
And I know I'm not the only revenue operator who's had the CEO walk in and say, I told the board we'd be doing this next quarter. What is a more realistic timeline that we can push back for?
Yeah, I've had that same experience as well, right? Of like, hey, we'd like to launch and we need to do this in the next 90 days. And it's like, that's not gonna, unfortunately, I wish I could wave a magical wand and make that happen, but it does take some time. I think, just getting your systems and foundational work can be anywhere from like 6 to 9 months to really have tested everything, make sure everything, the data actually ticks and ties. All of that is really important. And of course, you can start kind of like experimenting with smaller channels, hearing from your customers. Again, I think you need to have all of those signals in place before you're really kind of actioning it. So if users are telling you they think your tool is super intuitive, so easy, they love your onboarding, they didn't even need a pitch, if you're starting to see that, that's a really good indicator that your company is ready to move kind of towards this motion. And I think that's kind of the key.
Yeah, and where I've seen that timeline to make the adjustments in the product, the data integrations, make it available for online purchasing, where I've seen that really fall off the rails is the executive team doesn't always get in lockstep with the product development team.
Yeah.
And they may be really committed to their current roadmap and not want to meet you halfway. So beware.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's another thing, right? So it also kind of depends on how you're managing your particular product team. Again, this particular motion has to be really fast. It has to be iterative. You have to constantly be adapting. So it also a little bit depends on your company culture. If you are really locked in on a specific set of features, might not be the kind of perfect fit.
Yeah. Or if they always launch 6 to 12 months after they think they're going to, it's probably...
Totally.
Yeah.
If you can't make those fast cycles, if you don't have a really kind of like strong engineering and product team who can make these adjustments quickly on the fly, it'll be really, really challenging.
Yeah. Great advice. Where can people find you to network?
Yeah.
And ask more.
I am on LinkedIn. Love connecting with founders, operators, anyone in kind of the go-to-market space. So yeah, you can find me there, Lauren Knight, on LinkedIn.
Thanks so much for tuning in to today's episode, everybody.
For more great content like this, join our community at RevOpsCoop.com and check out the links provided in the show notes.
Keep it RevOpsAF, y'all.